Hi there, this is Solitary Ronin from Solitary Ronin Films, and welcome to another random review. Today's random review is Gate of Hell from 1953, directed by Tainosuke Kinugasa. This film actually won the Best Foreign Film award at the Oscars. This is the Masters of Cinema Blu-ray DVD combo, spine number 40. There's no extras apart from a 24-page booklet, which is an essay by Philip Kemp, a writing about the film by Carl Theodore Dreyer, which is obviously pretty interesting. This is a film that is in Technicolor. Martin Scorsese raves about it as being one of the greatest Technicolor films ever made. And it's almost as if Powell and Pressburger had made a samurai film. The colours are absolutely amazing. It's kind of a cross between a Powell and Pressburger film. It's almost Kurosawa maybe must have seen it, because it's a bit like Ran as well as far as the use of the colours. And at one point it's almost the Wizard of Oz, because there is almost a yellow brick floor in one of the buildings as well. This is the simple, straightforward tale of a 12th century coup d'etat, and during this coup the emperor's father and sister need to be sent away into hiding, and body doubles are asked for. So a character called Lady Kesa volunteers to pretend to be the emperor's sister, and a samurai, Morito, helps her escape and looks after her at a family building. And once the rebellion has been overthrown, when the samurai are getting their kind of rewards ceremony, some samurai are asking for, or some samurai receive like a new horse, or they get to move up in buildings, as we've seen in Kurosawa's Throne of Blood, for example. They move up in the kind of pecking order of estates and buildings. Morito is a slightly lower ranked samurai, and he has become infatuated with Lady Kesa, so he asks for an arranged marriage between the two. Kesa doesn't really feel the same way, but he wants this as his reward. But we find out that Lady Kesa is actually already married to a higher ranking samurai. So the rest of the film is Morito attempting to essentially steal Lady Kesa from this higher ranked samurai. It's interesting, apart from the sheer spectacle, because it is just a colour smorgasbord. Morito, for example, has some wonderful outfits, blues and purples. The use of yellows and golds are just jaw-dropping. But it's interesting in the sense that Morito becomes both the protagonist and the antagonist. It's also an interesting look at how women were treated during this time and throughout kind of Japanese feudal history, as pretty much just objects and chattel, almost possessions. Marito wants to possess her and own her more than what his concept of love for a marriage would be. At one point he threatens that he would rather kill her and her aunt, who she stays with, rather than not have her, which is obviously the classic male response to rejection. I'm not going to go into any more of the plot. There's some wonderful touches, like after the rebellion, one of the leaders' head is hung from the gate of hell, which looks very much like Rashomon Gate. It's just one of those gates in the Japanese countryside, because that's where this character had hung lots of heads previously. There's a wonderful scene where Marito is kind of reunited with Keisa when they're all praying for the fallen warriors' souls, and all their heads are on nice little shelves, which is handy because you always want a nice set of shelves for your decapitated heads. It's a wonderful little film. It's only about an hour and a half long. Again, the character of Mahito is interesting because you're kind of on his side, but then you're not on his side because he would much rather just kill Keisa than actually just stand down and realise that he's lost and there's not any chance of actually getting her. There's some familiar faces that you'll probably recognise, but one of the reasons I wanted to talk about Gate of Hell is the fact that not only do I have the Masters of Cinema Blu-ray release, but I also have the Criterion Region A. This is spine number 653, and this has no extras apart from an essay by Stephen Prince, who you'll probably be familiar, who does lots of Japanese work. He's done books on Kurosawa and others. It's one of those cases where, to be honest, I had bought the Criterion and I'd completely forgotten that I had the Eureka Masters of Cinema, as you do. But the artwork on the Criterion is really nice, and there's obviously the essay by Stephen Prince. But really the reason I wanted to talk about Gate of Hell, apart from the fact it's a really good film, is the fact that the other difference, I think the Criterion came out after the Masters of Cinema, because the Criterion has a new English subtitle translation. So I watched the film on the Eureka release, and I kind of skipped through it on the Criterion. Both prints are equally good, so I wouldn't say there's a preference between prints. But what I will say, the translation to Gate of Hell is not necessarily completely different, because it's not completely different. But there are different phrases used and different words used in just about every subtitle. So because in my ignorance I don't speak Japanese, it's almost as if you have two not completely different films, but there's certainly enough differences in the translation. So it's like, well, which one is more accurate? Which one should you actually rely on moving forward? The Eureka or the Criterion? So for example, there's a line where officials are at the gate of hell and one of the aides says we're being watched, and then in the Criterion it says people are watching us when the samurai are getting their rewards after the failed coup. There's lines about the gifts or the rewards, and it's kind of completely different context of the words. So it's just kind of interesting for those of us that don't speak Japanese, or I mean, I have a smattering of French, but I certainly couldn't keep up with the speed of the French language in French films, or don't speak Italian, or saddled through our own ignorance with only speaking English. It's what kind of version of the translation do you actually go with? I mean, again, there's not going to be major differences, but there's just contextual differences between, in this example, these two editions. Another example for me that I've mentioned before is the not very good DVD copy of Francesco Rossi's The Mattei Case, or The Mattei Affair, with Gian Maria Volonte, which hopefully will get a Blu-ray release at some point. I'm looking at you, Kino Lorber, considering you just released Rossi's Wonderful Illustrious Corpses and the entertaining but uneven Lucky Luciano by Rossi, so hopefully they release the Mattei Affair or the Mattei Case. But on the DVD release that I have, you have quite a lot of the Italian dialogue that doesn't seem to be subtitled, which is really frustrating, because I think I initially rated it as a 4, but I think if you actually had a proper translated edition, chances are it might actually be a 5-star film, but I just felt I wasn't getting the whole story just because there seemed to be dialogue going on without actually being subtitled. So it's just an interesting thing to talk about, I think, as far as are you getting the full story and the complete story, depending what edition and what translation you're actually watching. So please let me know in the comments below if you've seen Gate of Hell and what you think of it, and also if you have some examples of films that you feel there's a difference in the translation, or releases that you have that you feel there's lots of dialogue that doesn't actually have subtitles for, because those of us who sadly are monolingual, you can miss out on a lot of dialogue that perhaps they haven't translated. But certainly the film itself, I would highly recommend.